Okay, so I wanted to share a couple of thoughts that have been milling around in my mind the last few days. Some of it is in response to my own training, and some of it is in respectful response to Sifu Freddie Lee and some of the recent posts on FMK YouTube channel regarding sparring. Now, the other night I was given the opportunity to spar for probably the first time in 8 years, and I was really ecstatic about the experience. It was very exhilarating and familiar, and I missed it. I grew up on sparring. The earliest martial arts practice that I was involved in from age 12 to 18, my Sifu was he came from a competitive fighting background, and so our training was really intensely physical, and it involved a lot of sparring, and it also involved a lot of what we called street situations, where you'd have multiple attackers and we'd act out potential scenarios and carried through in fighting. And that experience was really good to me. When you practice sparring for, like, that was 6 years that I was sparring, and they were formative years for me. I was still a child, so I internalized a lot of it. And I'm not going to say that I'm any kind of great fighter or anything like that, but through that practice of sparring, I learned a lot in regards to being proficient in that kind of combat situation. I think sparring is really an essential tool that any martial artist who has the physical ability to spar should engage in that practice. Today the school that the dojo that I practice in, we don't focus a lot on sparring, and as a result, I can see the difference, I can feel the difference between someone like myself, who's in there, who's had prior experience that involve a lot of sparring, and somebody else who this may be their only martial arts experience and they haven't sparred, and they may be excellent with their katas, but it doesn't mean that they're able to fight. So I agree with Sifu Freddy that sparring is really a very, very important tool. It teaches you lots of different things. It will give you confidence. It'll teach you, if you practice contact sparring, which is what I grew up on, was kind of light to medium contact sparring with occasional hard contact. And in that kind of practice, you learn to take a jolt when you get hit. You learn how to take hits. You also learn how to defend yourself from hits a lot better than if you practice like partnered 2- and 3-step techniques and these kind of things. And you learn how to read other people's bodies a bit better, and you learn about your own techniques, and like Sifu Freddy says, what works and what doesn't seem to work. And it's not always the same for every person. In fact, I don't think it's ever the same for any person. different people use different techniques in a little bit of unique ways, and so what techniques might work really well for one person might not work well for another. But anyway, it is an essential tool for learning the combat aspect of martial arts. But having said that, there's also a lot of applications, techniques that cannot be used in a sparring climate. Some of the really injurious techniques, like finger jabs and gouging and claws, biting, ripping the hair out, single knuckle punches to vital points. There's quite a few techniques that you really can't use safely in sparring, and so you just don't, right? So, at least from my experience, most sparring involves practice in your movement, your various fighting stances. It involves a lot of punching, a lot of kicking, maybe some joint locks, maybe some sweeps done carefully, and that's about it. So there's actually a lot left out of sparring that you don't get practice using in that kind of spur of the moment context. But another thing that I wanted to point out was that the martial arts, at least to me, is more than just about the combat aspect, because I think if you're an intelligent guy, you can get away most of your life, especially your adult life, without having to get in any kind of physical confrontation with anybody. The exceptions are going to be, if you're attacked and mugged or something like this. But in terms of, people just trying to pick fights with you, it's real easy to just walk away and avoid that, and avoid the kind of situations where you're going to run into people that are like that. So, to me, to focus extremely on the combat aspect of martial arts as the important key, then you're really saying that you're training. You're spending a good part of your life, and if you're a lifetime martial artist, you spend decades practicing for an encounter that, if you're smart, is probably never going to happen. But there's more benefits to martial arts than that combat aspect. Martial arts is a way for to develop a certain kind of physical conditioning that I don't necessarily see in any other sports or physical activity. Like, there's a certain type of body that you gain after long-term martial arts practice, and I guess the best way I can describe it is a feeling of connectedness, between the different parts of your body. So your arms aren't alone, your legs aren't alone, and your hips aren't alone. They're all, everything's connected. So there's the physical aspect, And another part of that physical aspect is that martial arts can be used as therapy and treatment for people with serious physical conditions, for people with diseases and injuries, and in that respect, on some occasions, this training can even be a lifesaver for somebody who's suffering from a really crippling, debilitating disease, and this is the only kind of physical therapy that takes them out of it, which is sometimes the case. So there's that physical aspect, and then there's the mental stuff, right? So practice in martial arts builds confidence. I think it can make you a more peaceful person, depending on what it is that you're practicing. Teaches you discipline. And one of the things about it that's really kind of unique is it teaches you to be a teacher. And this is something that's missing from our public education system, is that students don't often get to be teachers. And in the martial arts, that's completely different. Every school that I've ever been involved in, senior students are always tasked to teach the less experienced students, and so as you're a learner, you're also a teacher, and I think that's an important skill to learn. And then there's the spiritual aspects of martial arts. One of those aspects includes the respect for what has been transferred down from ancestors. If you're in a line of traditional transmission, the gift that you're being given puts you in that lineage going all the way back, and having a respect for maintaining that's been passed down, so you can pass it down the same way to future generations. I think that's an important part too. And in that respect, a person would not be entirely wise to dismiss traditions, even those traditional styles where it appears as though the training is not going to be very functional toward actual combat situations, because in my experience, it's deceptive. I'll tell you, after growing up with sparring so heavily, later on when I was in college, and I went and practiced a couple of years of Taekwondo in Taekwondo school, and I practiced a couple of years of Aikido in a really traditional Aikido school, and I looked at other schools too, and I saw what they were doing, and I recognized that in a lot of cases, traditional schools don't have that same kind of fighting training, and so the students of those schools often don't appear to me as though I don't have the sense that they would actually be able to hold themselves very well in a combat situation using what they've been taught. But like I said, that can be deceptive. And I'll give you an example. Currently practicing in a Gohakukai dojo, and Gohakukai is the full traditional systems of Goju Ryu and Tomarite combined. So they're both treated separately. but in the same dojo, and the full systems are taught. And so these are traditional systems, and in some schools they do practice a lot more sparring even in these systems, especially Goju. But where the school that I'm going to, the sensei doesn't really emphasize sparring, but occasionally, because one of the things about sparring is that when you get students sparring, things tend to get competitive, and you start potentially losing some of the benefits that you can gain for the mental aspect of things and the spiritual aspect of things when you are pitting students against one another in competition of sparring. But it doesn't have to be that way, and I think the way that sparring is used in this dojo that I'm talking about, it doesn't tend to lend itself to that kind of competitive thing coming out. So mostly what's practiced there is these basics in both systems, and the kata in both systems, and some other drills that go along with them. And so, this would be one of the kind of schools that I was talking about before, where, in the past, if I'd have walked into it and watched what was going on, I would have thought, that's nice and it's pretty and everything, but probably couldn't really function very well in a real combat situation. But really, when I came to the school, what I was looking for was a lifetime system, something that I could do all of my life into my old age, and this is the kind of system that you can do that in. One day, a young sports fighter came into the dojo, and this was a cage fighter. And he was probably, he's probably 24, 25, and really in the prime of his health and everything. And he was sitting and watching, and he was talking with our sensei. And, he was pointing out that he thought that what was being taught there wouldn't work in a real fight. And our sensei, who I consider a master of martial arts, started pointing out to him all the other kind of benefits that you can get from the practice, some of which transcend the combat benefits. But he also said, that the combat aspects of Goju Ryu and Tomorite were solid. And so this guy continued to doubt it, and he was told to go away and think about it. And so he went away. The next day he returned, and he was just standing there with his arms crossed, kind of scowling, and he had a real challenging air to him. And our sensei went to talk to him and asked him if he thought about it. Yeah, I thought about it, and this stuff can't work. And the way he was looking at him, our sensei was, reading his thoughts. He says, "Well, you think you could take me?" And the cage fighting guys, yeah. It's all right, come. So they went out on the floor, and this guy, this sports fighter, really aggressively attacked the sensei with everything he had. He really went after. He wanted to hurt him. And I'll tell you, the master, on his side, what I saw, and I witnessed this whole thing, was all he tried to do was ensure that this kid didn't get hurt. So he could have hurt him, from what I saw, a lot of times and badly, and he didn't. He didn't try to punch the kid. He didn't try to kick the kid. He basically just parried what was coming at him, and when the kid got in too close, he was wrapped up and put down on the ground and locked up like that, like nothing. And it was almost, you could see it was almost effortless. And once he submitted, he was let back up, and he'd go right back into the same aggressive attack, and he'd get put right back down again. And this went on probably 10, 12 times. This kid was laid out on the ground, and each time he was put down on the ground a little harder. And finally, Sensei had him on the ground and had him locked up, and put his hand on his head and pushed his neck in a certain way. And he told him, if I was a bad guy, one little push, and from here, and you're not going to be practicing martial arts anymore. And he asked him, is that what you want out of your training? Because if you're looking to fight, somewhere along the line you're going to run into somebody who's not nice, and they're going to hurt you. And he let the kid up, and the kid was quite astonished with what had gone down, because he really was confident that none of this traditional martial art was applicable. And what this sensei was using against him were techniques that come straight out of the katas. They were the more complex, supposedly less efficient techniques that you never see used in sparring. But in this situation, which was less like sparring and more like an actual fight, because the kid was trying to hurt him, they were very applicable, and they were used effortlessly, and to incredible success. The kid didn't stand a chance at all, and all the sensei was trying to do was make sure that in this kid's aggressive approach, that he didn't end up having to hurt him. So the kid was quite astonished himself, and the first thing he asked was, "Do you lift weights?" Sensei looked around at the dojo, said, "Do you see any weights here?" "No." "No, I don't use any weights. This practice that you've been coming and watching, and that you don't think works, that's what I've used." And what the kid was referring to in terms of do you use weights was because the sensei is very, very strong. It's very, very strong, very, very rooted, very, very balanced, and all of that comes from repeated careful kata practice. And really, myself, I think it takes a gifted person sometimes to pull all the benefits out of those kind of traditional practices. I don't think just anybody is able to do it. I think most of the time it's true that sparring will take the average person up to as high as they're going to go. But there are these what I would consider masters who are gifted in a way that they're able to draw out of those traditional forms and transcend even above that, even above what sparring can give you. It's not that, it's not that they don't get that experience of sparring too, but it's that and then some. There's a higher level, is what I think. And I think that because I witnessed it, and all I can do is share what I've witnessed and experienced. But that's the case, and the kind of strength and the kind of balance, the kind of rootedness, and the efficiency with which you can finish someone just now. Some of that can be gained but can't necessarily be gained in regular sparring practice. You have to get it in other ways. So you don't want to lock yourself into only sparring, I don't think. But sparring is, I agree, a key, and it's a key for rapid development for the average person. But there's another level, and that's what I'm experimenting with now. I don't know if I'll ever have that gift that I'm able to unlock and use the potential of those traditional forms. I don't know if I'll ever have that, but having witnessed the application of that, I can't help but try. So, these are my thoughts. I think, it's important to realize that all of these different practices in martial arts, including the sparring, including the basic techniques, including drills, including katas and forms, including applications practice straight from kata, and of course including physical conditioning. It's beyond just the martial applications, but the physical conditioning with things like running and sit-ups and pull-ups and push-ups and all of this, and training of hardening the body, training of hardening the forearms, the shins, the feet, the hands. And all of these things are important, and that someone should strive for balance. Not get too focused on any one thing as the key that's going to unlock every door. So those are my thoughts for today.